Stop it! What are you doing? You can't destroy this bridge! Move! Get out of the way now! We're not leaving until you move!
They thought they could destroy my property, and I would stay quiet. They thought because they had money, lawyers, a gated neighborhood, and an HOA board full of people who love power, they could push around the one guy living on old family land beside them. They thought wrong. Because when HOA Karen ordered my grandfather's bridge torn down without warning, she didn't start a disagreement. She started a war. And before it was over, an entire luxury neighborhood would be begging me to reopen the only road they depended on. But none of that happened overnight. This started years before the road closure, before lawsuits, before barricades, before panic spread through an entire neighborhood, before people who once mocked me would be standing at my gate begging for mercy. It started with one woman and her obsession with control, and that obsession became her downfall. My family land had been there long before Willow Creek Estates ever existed. Long before luxury homes, long before manicured lawns and private security gates, long before homeowners held meetings about grass height and mailbox paint. Back then, it was open country, rolling fields, thick oak trees, a creek winding through pasture, dirt roads connecting farms. My grandfather bought the land when nobody wanted it. People said the creek flooded too often, said the soil was rough, said it would never be worth much. He bought it anyway. And he built nearly everything on that property with his own hands. The barn, the fencing, the workshop, and the bridge. That bridge wasn't decorative. It wasn't some old country relic. It was part of the land itself. Strong timber, steel supports, hand-built. It crossed the creek and connected the house side of the property to pasture and workshop land. Without it, half the property was difficult to reach. As a kid, I spent summers on that bridge, fishing under it, skipping stones, helping my grandfather replace planks, listening to stories while sitting on the railing at sunset. I can still hear his voice. He used to run his hand across the old wood and say, "Anything built right can outlast the people who doubt it." At the time, I thought he was talking about bridges. Years later, I realized he meant a lot more. Then everything changed. Developers showed up. They bought farmland all around us. Bulldozers moved in. Trees came down. Roads appeared. And eventually Willow Creek Estates rose out of former pasture. Huge homes, stone walls, decorative fountains, security gates, a neighborhood so polished it looked fake. And at the center of all of it, the HOA. Now, because our land existed before the subdivision, we were never part of that HOA. That should have been simple. But to certain people, it was offensive. Especially Karen. Karen didn't act like a neighbor. She acted like she owned the county. The first day she came up my driveway, she didn't introduce herself, didn't wave, didn't say hello. She walked up with a clipboard like an inspector, pointed at my barn. That needs updating. Pointed at my truck. That can't be parked there. Pointed at my tools. That looks messy. Complained about chickens. Firewood. The old tractor. Then she pointed toward the creek and said, "And that bridge looks unsafe." I laughed. I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. I told her, "That bridge has stood longer than your neighborhood." Her face changed. That tight little smile appeared. The kind of smile people wear when they've decided you're now a problem. And from that day forward, I was. At first the harassment was subtle, then constant. Noise complaints, random county inspections, anonymous reports, code enforcement showing up for nonsense. One inspector came because someone claimed I was storing hazardous agricultural waste. It was compost. Another came because someone reported illegal livestock operations. I had 6 chickens. 6. One time someone reported I was operating an unlicensed mechanic business out of my barn because I repaired my own tractor. That's how absurd it got. And somehow Karen was always nearby, always involved, always pretending innocence. "Oh, I'm just protecting community standards." Community standards. She said it like it was holy scripture. Then came letters, fake violation notices, warnings with HOA letterhead, threats demanding I remove structures, including my bridge. Imagine getting told by a woman who doesn't own your property that your grandfather's bridge violates neighborhood aesthetics. That was Karen, and every time I ignored her, she escalated. Looking back, I should have realized it wouldn't stop, because people obsessed with control don't accept boundaries. They attack them. And Karen hated one boundary most of all. The fact she couldn't control me. But there was something she didn't understand. Something she never bothered learning. And it sat buried in decades-old paperwork. Years before the subdivision existed, my grandfather signed a narrow easement agreement. It allowed future access through part of our land if development ever came. Limited access. Conditional access. That little clause eventually became the neighborhood's main road. Their entrance. Their lifeline. Their dependency. But ownership wasn't simple. Shared rights. Conditions. Maintenance obligations. Restrictions. Complicated enough most residents had no clue. Karen certainly didn't. She assumed the road belonged entirely to the HOA. That assumption would ruin her. At the time, I didn't even realize how much leverage sat in those old papers. Not until she pushed too far. And she pushed hard. It happened on a Tuesday. Clear skies. Quiet morning. Nothing unusual. I was in town buying feed when my phone rang. My neighbor sounded panicked. Get home right now. No explanation. Just panic. I drove back faster than I should have. Turned into the property and froze. An excavator sat by the creek. Workers were tearing apart my bridge. Planks crashing. Supports cut. Timber dropping into the water. And standing there supervising. Karen. Watching. Satisfied. Smiling. I jumped out yelling. What are you doing? She looked calm. Cold. And said, we removed a dangerous hazard. Removed. Like she was talking about weeds. I demanded permits. Authorization. Who approved this? What gave her the right? Nothing. Turns out she convinced the HOA board the bridge was an emergency liability issue. Hired contractors. Skipped ownership verification. Skipped legal review. Skipped permission. They destroyed private property. My family's property. My grandfather's bridge. And for a moment, I thought I might lose it. I wanted to scream. Call police. Drag the contractors off the site. But instead, something colder settled in. Quiet. Focused. Strategic. Because anger burns fast. Strategy lasts. And in that moment, I realized Karen may have made a fatal mistake. 2 days later I sat in a property attorney's office. Old deeds spread across his desk. Survey maps. Historic easement records. Maintenance clauses. He studied everything in silence. Then smiled. That smile changed everything. He asked me, do they know their neighborhood depends on your easement? I said, I don't think they even know. He laughed. Surveyors reviewed boundaries. Old county records resurfaced. Historic clauses confirmed. Every document Karen ignored became ammunition. And every paper proved something bigger. The HOA had far less power than they believed. And I had far more. We began drafting legal notices. Preparing filings. Documenting damages from the bridge destruction. Building a case. And the more prepared we became, the calmer I got. Because now I knew. Karen had started a fight she couldn't win. I almost felt bad when the letters were ready. Almost. Because once those notices went out, panic would begin. And there'd be no going back. I remember holding the draft in my hand. Certified notice of potential access suspension. 30 days. That was all. 30 days until an entire luxury neighborhood realized the quiet country guy Karen mocked might control the road beneath all their tires. I imagined Karen opening that letter, reading it, realizing what she'd done. And for the first time, I smiled. Because she thought tearing down my bridge was victory. She thought she had humiliated me, taught me a lesson. But she had no idea she had triggered something much bigger. Because the notices were ready. The road was vulnerable. And her neighborhood was about to learn exactly who controlled their only way in and out. And when those letters arrived, chaos began. But that was only the beginning. There's something terrifying about getting certified mail saying your neighborhood may lose access to its only road. Especially when you live in a $1 million gated community where people assume comfort is permanent. People like that don't think about roads. They assume roads just exist. That water comes on. Power stays running. Gates open. Emergency services arrive. They assume infrastructure is invisible. Until someone reminds them, it isn't. And when every resident in Willow Creek Estates got that certified letter, panic hit instantly. Real panic. Not irritation. Not neighborhood gossip. Panic. Because those letters didn't sound like a bluff. They sounded legal. Cold. Formal. Specific. 30 days until access suspension due to easement violations. 30 days. That was all. And suddenly a neighborhood full of people who worried about landscaping rules had something much bigger to fear. Being cut off. We had filed damages over the bridge destruction first. Trespass, property damage, liability. Then the notices went out. Every single household got one. I heard later some residents thought it was a joke, until they read the attached legal references. Then nobody laughed. The neighborhood lost its mind. Emergency HOA meetings were called that same night. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Residents packed the meeting room. Phones ringing nonstop. Emails exploding. People demanding answers. And for the first time, Karen had none. For the first time since she started treating everyone like subjects, her authority cracked. And once cracks appear and people built on power, they spread fast. Rumors tore through the neighborhood. People said property values would crash. Some feared mortgage issues. Others panicked about emergency access. One resident reportedly asked if ambulances could even reach the neighborhood if the road closed permanently. No one had considered any of this before, because no one thought their entire subdivision depended on an easement partly controlled by the guy Karen kept harassing. Me. And once people understood that, anger replaced panic. At one HOA meeting, I was told a homeowner slammed both fists on a table and yelled, "You picked a fight with the guy who owns our road?" Another shouted, "You tore down his bridge for this." Someone else reportedly screamed, "Remove Karen now." And suddenly the same people who had backed her turned on her. That's the thing about neighborhood politics. Loyalty lasts until property values feel threatened. Then it disappears fast. Meanwhile, the countdown kept moving. 30 days. 29. 28. Every day the fear got worse. Karen tried pretending she had control. She told residents it was bluffing, that I'd fold, that lawyers would stop me. But I knew the paperwork. And my attorney knew the law. Karen knew neither. Then she stormed to my property, angrier than I'd ever seen her. She came marching up the driveway, red-faced, furious. No polite act anymore. No fake diplomacy. Just rage. She threatened lawsuits. Threatened injunctions. Threatened county action. Threatened to have the easement seized somehow. Threatened everything. I said almost nothing. I handed her copies of the easement documents and said one sentence. "You destroyed my bridge." That was it. And I saw something I'd never seen in her before. Fear. Real fear. For the first time, Karen realized this wasn't bluffing. For the first time, she understood she may have started something she couldn't stop. And that terrified her. Days kept slipping away. 30 became 20. 20 became 10. Then 5. Then 3. Residents started begging the board to settle. Some wanted the HOA to pay whatever I asked. Others demanded Karen resign immediately. People were turning savage. Neighbors yelling at each other in the street. Emergency meetings every night. The whole neighborhood was unraveling. And Karen still believed I'd fold. Big mistake. Because closure day came. And so did my crews. It was early. Barely sunrise. Fog hanging over the road. Quiet enough you could hear birds. Then trucks rolled in. Contractors. Survey crew. Attorney. Everything arranged. Everything documented. Everything legal. Even the sheriff's office had been informed ahead of time. No surprises. No shortcuts. No mistakes. Temporary gates were unloaded. Barricades positioned. Legal closure notices mounted. Chains secured. And just like that, the road closed. Done. At first there was silence. Like the neighborhood didn't believe it. Then chaos. Absolute chaos. Cars lined up. Drivers honking. Residents gathering at the gate. People yelling into phones. Delivery trucks turned around. Contractors denied entry. Visitors blocked. Confusion everywhere. Their perfect little controlled world interrupted. Because of one bridge. And I won't lie, watching it happen felt surreal. Not triumphant. Surreal. Because it was working. Then Karen arrived. And I'll never forget it. She came racing up furious. Jumped out screaming. Demanding access be reopened. Calling it illegal. Threatening arrest. Threatening court action. My attorney calmly handed her documents. She read them. Her face changed. Shock. Then disbelief. Then panic. She looked up at me. And I told her one sentence. Should have left my bridge alone. Then I got in my truck. And drove off. Still one of my favorite moments in my life. Because bullies never imagine consequences until they hit them personally. And consequences had arrived. Then came the 3 days that broke everything. 3 days. That's all it took. Residents revolted. Emergency HOA sessions nonstop. County board members blaming each other. The HOA was imploding. People who praised Karen wanted her removed. Some wanted her sued personally. One rumor said homeowners were organizing a vote to force her out. And honestly, I believe it. Because by day 3, Karen came to my porch. Not angry. Broken. No clipboard. No designer sunglasses. No superiority. Just panic. And exhaustion. She looked like she hadn't slept. She stood there quietly and said, "I made a mistake." I looked at her and said, "A mistake is misplacing paperwork. You demolished private property." She didn't argue. Didn't defend herself. Because she couldn't. Then she asked what it would take. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. And I gave terms. Full bridge reconstruction. Not repairs. Reconstruction. Every legal fee covered. Public written apology. New easement structure renegotiated. Her resignation official. And guarantees protecting my property permanently. Her face looked sick hearing it. But she agreed. Because she had no leverage left. And bullies without leverage collapse fast. Funny how that works. But I didn't reopen the road immediately. No chance. Paperwork first. Signatures first. Commitments first. Residents hated waiting. Pressure mounted. People begged the board to hurry. But I had learned something. Never trust verbal promises from people who tore down your bridge. Everything had to be written. Everything. Every clause. Every obligation. Every protection. No loopholes. No surprises. Because if Karen had taught me anything, it was never assume someone acting in bad faith suddenly becomes honorable. So I waited. And made them wait too. Some called it petty. Maybe it was. I called it careful. Because once paperwork was signed, then the road reopened. But nothing was the same. The balance of power had changed forever. I thought shutting down the road was the climax. I was wrong. Because what happened next, I never saw coming. Because in the final chapter, Karen's downfall got even worse. And the neighborhood I fought would do something I never expected. I thought rebuilding the bridge would end the story. After the road reopened, after Karen surrendered, after the legal papers were signed, I honestly believed the war was over. I thought the biggest chapter had already happened. I thought shutting down the only road an entire luxury neighborhood depended on was the ending. Turns out, that was where the real twist began. Because what happened after the fight surprised me even more than the fight itself. Enemies became allies. Karen lost everything. And somehow the bridge she tried to destroy changed far more than my property. It changed the whole neighborhood. And it started with rebuilding. The HOA paid. Every cent. Not reluctantly either. They paid fast. Because after the road shut down, no one in that neighborhood wanted another conflict with me. And they knew it. But this wasn't some cheap repair job. No patchwork fix. No quick cosmetic replacement. They built a real bridge. A serious bridge. Stone supports sunk deep. Steel frame reinforcement. Hardwood decking. Engineered stronger than the original. Bigger. Safer. Beautiful. Honestly, better than what my grandfather built. And saying that meant something. I stood there watching construction some mornings before sunrise. Coffee in hand. Workers measuring. Steel being set. Concrete curing. Boards going down. And I felt something I didn't expect after all that anger. Peace. Real peace. Because what Karen destroyed got rebuilt stronger. There's a lesson in that. Sometimes the things people try to break in your life return stronger than before. That bridge became proof. And every bolt they installed felt like a reminder. Karen lost. But the bigger victory came in paperwork. The easement rewrite. That was the real win. The part most people wouldn't understand unless they've dealt with property law. Because bridges can be rebuilt. Leverage is harder to get. And now the new easement agreement was massively favorable. Maintenance obligations shifted to the HOA. Permanent boundary protections documented. Inspection rights written in. Access rights conditional. No assumptions anymore. No gray area. No Karen-type board could ever pull something like this again. Ever. And when my attorney handed me the final signed agreement, he smiled and said, "You didn't just win the dispute. You changed the balance of power." He was right. Karen's power was gone. But so was her reputation. And around Willow Creek Estates, that mattered maybe even more. Then something happened I never expected. I got invited to an HOA meeting. I laughed when I opened the letter. I thought it was a joke. Me? At an HOA meeting? The guy they fought? The guy who shut their road down? It sounded absurd. But curiosity got me there. So I went. Walked into the clubhouse. And the second I stepped inside, people stood up and started applauding. I just froze. Didn't know what to do. I thought maybe they were mocking me. They weren't. An older resident walked over, shook my hand, and said, "You ended a tyrant." I'll never forget that. Then stories started coming out. Residents told me things I never knew. Karen had bullied everyone, threatened fines, controlled landscaping, harassed families over tiny violations, weaponized HOA rules, made people miserable. One woman told me Karen fined her over a holiday wreath. Another man said Karen threatened legal action because he parked a boat in his driveway for one weekend. One couple said they were considering moving because of her. And I realized, Karen hadn't just targeted me. She'd been terrorizing everyone. The difference was, I pushed back. And somehow, my bridge where ended her reign. Still surreal to think about. One guy actually laughed and told me, "You didn't just save your bridge, you saved the neighborhood." Never saw that coming. The people I thought were enemies became friendly. Some even came out later to help around my property, brought food during bridge construction, stopped by to talk. People I once saw as arrogant suburban strangers became neighbors. Funny how conflict changes things. But Karen wasn't done paying. Not even close. Because while the HOA settled, my personal claim against her continued. And that mattered. Because she ordered the demolition personally. Intentional misconduct. Not some innocent board misunderstanding. She pushed it. She owned it. And legally, that mattered. Her insurance tried to dodge coverage. Denied it. Claimed intentional misconduct exclusions. Disaster for her. Because now she faced personal exposure. And that's when reality hit her hard. She settled privately. Paid damages. Covered losses. And from what I heard, it hurt. Financially. Reputation-wise. Every way. Then rumors spread she sold her house months later. Moved away. Couldn't face the neighbors. Honestly, I believe it. Because imagine trying to attend neighborhood events after nearly trapping everyone behind closed gates. Impossible. All over a bridge she once called rustic. That part still makes me laugh. A bridge she mocked, cost her everything. But the part one remember most happened months later. I was standing on the rebuilt bridge at sunset. Water moving below. Wind through the trees. Quiet. The kind of silence only country land has. And I just stood there, thinking about everything. The fight. The road closure. Karen. My grandfather. And then I heard his words in my head. Clear as ever. Never fight angry. Fight smart. That's what won. Not rage. Not revenge. Patience. Law. Leverage. Karen thought kindness meant weakness. That being quiet meant being powerless. She learned otherwise. Because sometimes, the quiet man people underestimate owns the road beneath their tires. Literally. People ask me sometimes if I regret shutting down the road. No, not for a second. Because bullies count on people backing down. That's how they survive. When nobody pushes back, they keep escalating. Karen thought power meant doing whatever she wanted. She learned power without limits becomes self-destruction. And the truth is, she caused her own downfall. I didn't destroy Karen. Her arrogance did. I just let consequences arrive. There's a difference. And that matters. People always ask, would I do it again? Absolutely. Because some lessons only consequences can teach. And Karen needed consequences. Expensive ones. So yes, HOA Karen tore down my private bridge without warning. And I legally shut down the only road her entire neighborhood relied on. She thought she was protecting property values. Instead, she nearly trapped an entire subdivision behind its own gates. Because she couldn't leave one old bridge alone. And every time I drive across that rebuilt bridge, I smile. Because Karen paid to rebuild what she tried to destroy. And taught herself a lesson. A very expensive lesson. But maybe the strangest part? Sometimes I think she accidentally improved my life. Because without her arrogance, the bridge wouldn't be stronger. The easement would. This wasn't even the craziest neighborhood war I've seen. Not even close. And if there's one thing this story proves, never underestimate the quiet neighbor with old deeds, patience, and a road you depend on.